like Natalie, I guess, when people say your testimony, you think, oh, really? There's nothing, exciting. It's just how things happened. Sometimes we don't get it, and I think I'm one of those I never got it because, I should have done because of growing up with my family. My mum was a churchgoer. She was Church of England, an Anglican, but she was a Christian, really was. Whereas my dad, I think, was probably, a sort of weekend Christian, I would suggest. But my mum was always keen on the church. I grew up in Kent, a little place called Rust Hall, which is outside of Tunbridge Wells, and like most villages, there was a small church, so we went there. But my two brothers, Robert was never around, he was at boarding school, and my older brother, Stephen, he was in the choir, but I just didn't get it. What I did get, though, was I went along to Sunday school, and the best thing about Sunday school that I can remember was warm marmalade rolls. Now you're talking, but for the rest of the teaching, I don't know, I don't remember any of it. But I guess there was some sort of impact later on. Then we moved to Eastbourne and didn't go to church at all. Now my mum was good, she did, but she didn't go as much. And I think I turned into a typical teenager. I just didn't get church. So, as life goes on, I went to university at 18, went to Canterbury, and I was a typical student, I guess. I lived in digs and I lived in accommodation, and I did quite a bit of study in the week, but, I drifted along, and that was the way life was going. I was a bit of a drifter, I think, and I ended up working for a company called Parker Pens, which I'm sure most people have heard of, and I worked there for 3.5 years, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do, because I don't know if people remember a TV programme in the 70s called The Sweeney. Oh, yes. I wanted to be like that. And that feeling, I guess, didn't really go away until I actually became a police officer in 1986. A long time ago. Anyway, what was I doing and what was God doing in my life? I don't really know. I guess working in the police, you become slightly insular and you tend to rely on a small circle of people. And colleagues, sometimes, you think they may be friends, but actually they're colleagues. So I didn't have that many friends, one or two, I would say. And throughout the 1980s and 90s, I worked hard at being what I thought was a reasonable sort of bloke, I worked, and I think the police became my life to some extent, which isn't always a good thing because you need friends from all sorts of occupations, and the police was and is still quite insular. So I had a small circle of friends. I wasn't the best dad in the world to Chris and Matt, but there we go. Life goes on. But I became increasingly, I think, cynical and probably hard-hearted with the way I treated and looked upon people, because sometimes I think you can feel that you're better than others. Well, the police and certainly the people I dealt with on a daily basis, I probably came across as being that person who thought, they've got themselves in this predicament. What do I care? I've got a job to do, and that was it. Fortunately, in 2003 I met Debbie. Yeah, oh, yeah. Fortunately, she's got her head down. She's obviously listening. Anyway, so life improved for me. I shan't tell you the joke. Yeah, I will tell you the joke about how I opened the cell door and there she was. She was a work colleague. She wasn't in the cell as a drunk, needing assistance, but, she's now looking daggers at me. So we had some friends. Debbie was a colleague, and she was a community officer, and then she became a police officer. But she was a Christian, and actually looking back, she was probably a good mate at the time. And Deb said to me, I'm going to go to King's Church in Hastings. And I went, are you? Yep, she says, I'm going to go. Deb says, this is the other Debbie, as it said, come along. So I'm going to go. You can come if you want to or not. So I went, oh, all right, I think I'll come along. Anyway, we went, and at that particular time, looking back, I didn't really connect with what was going on, and other things were happening in our lives, and we ended up with Jasmine, our granddaughter, staying with us for a short period of time. So church went by the by. But another friend, Scott, and Laurie was also in the police, they went to Elim Church in Hastings, so we got another invite, and we went along to Elim. And again, excuse me, I've had the lurgy. Again, I don't think I really got it at that stage. So we stayed with Elim probably less than a year, and it just wasn't right for us. So again, Deb said to me, I'm going to go back to King's, I think we need to go back to King's. And at that point in my life, I was just wondering about, is this it? Is this going to be it? And I think in terms of a testimony, that feeling of uneasiness and I suppose emptiness inside is something that really affected me looking back. And I didn't want it to just be it. So the second time we went back to King's, I really did start to get it. And I think the Spirit was beginning to move in me. And slowly, I think it didn't just sort of happen overnight. It took good people to be surrounded by good Christian people is really important. And I've heard people say, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't really go to church. But you need to be surrounded by good Christian people. 2011 was a pretty momentous year. That was the year in April I lost my father, and a lot was going on that year. But fortunately, again, we kept going, and there was a great preacher at King's in Hastings at that time called Santino. And he's the sort of guy I really could connect with. His preaching was really good, and he just kept telling us about the goodness of God and the way, again, at work, he had a good colleague that just kept telling him about the goodness of God. And I remember over that period, I think it was probably summertime, Santino preached a lot, and he would also, at the end of his preaching, talk to us about the prayer of salvation. And just one day, I think I found myself, and I think Debbie was with me, and I just felt my tears rolling down my face because of the prayer of salvation. And I was repeating it at that time. And of course, the invitation was, come up at the end and we'll talk about it. So I went up to Santino and said, yeah. So we repeated that prayer, and that was the point I became a Christian. And then, our good friends again, on the 4th of December, we got baptised. And one of my choices for my baptism prayer was 10,000 Reasons. So we've just sung that, and that's one of my favourites. And that really is my testimony. So I've gone from a hard-hearted, cynical, but I'm told if occasionally I do lapse. So I need to be reminded not to be that cynical person, my dead self. But it is difficult. It's not an easy journey, and it's not an outstanding, I envy these people that, see Jesus come to them in a different way. But I think the love of God is there, and it slowly happens in my case, and that's my testimony.